14 clubs is supposed to mean precision, but when I looked at my real carry numbers and dispersion patterns, I didn't see clean gaps, I saw overlap. This is 3-Putt Polly and the author of the book Playable Golf, and I'm a regular golfer using data to make better decisions and improve my game. Now let's get into it. Since I started playing this amazing game almost 2 years ago, I've been carrying 14 clubs because that's what serious golfers do. That's the tradition. That's what the rules dictate. 14 is the maximum allowed. And culturally, we treat that maximum like a standard. It feels logical. More clubs should mean more coverage. If you have a club every 10 to 12 yards, you should never be stuck between numbers. You just look at the yardage needed, pull the right club, and swing. At least, that's the belief. But I'd never actually tested whether my clubs produced functionally distinct yardage windows. My assumption is that a club only earns its place in the bag if it creates a clearly separate yardage window of its own. So for context, I'm a mid-20s handicap. I've been playing less than 2 years. I just dropped down to a 22 recently. I struggle to find consistent face impact. My dispersion ranges are still developing, and yet I was carrying a tour-level number of tools, 14 clubs. Honestly, that never felt strange to me until I pulled the data. Shout out to FlightScope for that one. I ran multiple launch monitor sessions with my Mevo Plus, exported my carry averages, and looked at all the end front to back, left to right patterns instead of just the good shots. And when I laid that information out in a ladder, the assumption cracked. Not emotionally, but mathematically. And that's where this experiment really begins. When I ran those launch monitor sessions, I wasn't looking for drama. I was expecting confirmation. I expected to see a clean staircase, driver at the top, then my 5-wood, 9-wood, 4-iron, 5-iron, etc., each one stepping down in clear, predictable increments. That's what 14 clubs is supposed to create: structure, separation, defined yardage bands. So I exported the data and built a carry ladder using full swings only. And here's what I saw at the long end of my bag. My 4-iron averaged about 161. My 5-iron averaged about 159. That's pretty tight, and a little shorter than I would have liked. But averages don't tell the full story. Every club lives in a range. So my 4-iron shots landed roughly between 154 and 166. My 5-iron shots landed roughly between 153 and 168. So those two clubs don't just sit close together, they're almost completely overlapping. Now here's where it gets more interesting. My 9-wood averaged about 166 yards, but its shorter shots dipped down into the high 150s. Which means some of my 9-wood shots were landing in the exact same zone as my 4-iron and 5-iron. So we've got 3 different clubs, different shafts, lofts, and shapes, all landing in the same carry neighborhood. So that was kind of the first real red flag, because at that point, it's not just adjacent irons being close, it's cross-category overlap, a wood dipping into iron territory. So dispersion doesn't care about what the loft chart says. Dispersion doesn't care what the number is stamped on the sole. It only shows you what your swing actually produces. What my swing was producing wasn't 14 distinct windows, it was layers. Now, to be fair, not everything overlapped. My 5-wood averaged about 181 and lived mostly above the 9-wood band. That was a cleaner separation. That was a functional gap. But as a long iron range, the part of my bag that's supposed to give me precision into longer approach shots, I didn't have any clean steps. I had redundancy. Instead of a staircase, I had a stacking. So once I could see that stacking clearly, the next layer became impossible to ignore, because golf decisions don't happen in isolation, they happen inside a structure. Every time you choose a club, you're standing at what I'll call the trunk of a tree. From the trunk, branches extend. Each branch represents a choice. If only one club clearly fits the yardage window, then there's one obvious branch. You step into it, decision made. You don't linger on, you don't debate. But if 3 clubs overlap the same yardage, you don't have one branch, you now have 3. And when multiple branches look equally reasonable, the brain doesn't move decisively. Now you've got to evaluate. You compare, you negotiate. Which club is better? Should I take the higher flight of the 9-wood? Should I hit the lower 4-iron? Should I swing a smooth 5? Should I try to squeeze a little extra out of that 5? None of these thoughts are dramatic. They don't feel like panic. They're small. But subtle negotiation changes your tempo. It changes how long you stand over the ball. It changes your internal certainty. And certainty certainly matters because the swing itself is already demanding enough. Low point control, face angle, path, speed, strike quality, all that stuff. That's a full cognitive load your brain is working on. And if your brain is still sorting through branches while you're walking into the shot, now you're carrying tension into the motion. And tension is expensive. So what surprised me was this. More clubs didn't feel like more precision to me. They felt like more internal conversations. So let's zoom into a common scoring situation, a simple 100-yard approach. With a full 14 club bag, that number might reasonably give me a full 9, a firm 8, maybe a full pitching wedge. All of those have produced shots near that number in my real data. So once again, I'm standing at the trunk of a decision tree, and instead of one obvious branch, I've got several. Now, this isn't dramatic indecision, it's just hesitation. And hesitation shows up in small ways. You step back from the ball. You recheck your yardage. You regrip the club. You tell yourself to swing smooth. You try to guide the shot. Well, golf punishes guidance. When you guide the club instead of committing to it, strike quality drops. And here's something almost every golfer has experienced, whether they admit to it or not. You finish a round, maybe you're cleaning your clubs, and you realize there are 1 or 2 clubs that never left your bag, not even once. Maybe a long iron, maybe a lob wedge, maybe that fairway wood you bring just in case. 18 holes, 0 swings in some of those clubs. So that's not dispersion data, that's behavioral data. If a club goes untouched for an entire round, it says either the yardage window rarely appears, or when it does appear, you don't fully trust that club. And if that's true, then the club isn't really expanding clarity, it's expanding possibility without expanding confidence. And possibility without confidence becomes hesitation. So before we talk about reshaping my bag, we need to talk about how I decided which clubs actually earned their place. Because I didn't randomly pull clubs out. The data narrowed the tree for me. My dispersion reduced the branches. And that's where the real framework begins. So before I explain the filtering process, there's something important that happened before the data hit me. Now, about a few months ago, I built a pre-World War I hickory bag, circa 1905, 1915 range. Just 7 clubs, all of them more than 100 years old. Thin faces, small heads, hickory shafts that flex in ways just modern clubs just don't. And when I started playing rounds with the vintage set, something unexpected happened. The game didn't feel harder, it felt clearer. With only 6 or 7 club options, there wasn't really a lot of negotiation going on. There weren't 15 possible yardage solutions, there were 1 or 2. And when you only have 1 or 2 options, something subtle shifts. You commit. You don't scroll through possibilities in your head or your chart. You just choose. Even though those clubs are absolutely less forgiving than my modern bag, my decisions felt lighter. It was kind of weird. That experience broke the psychological grip of the 14 club concept, because once you play a full round with only 6 or 7 clubs and realize it's completely viable, 14 stops feeling mandatory and it starts feeling optional. My hickory bag didn't tell me to drop my current bag down to 8 clubs, but it gave me the mental permission to question those 14. And that permission was the genesis of my golf bag filter. So, speaking of the filter, I needed it to be objective. So I built it around 3 questions. 1, does a given club create a distinct, reliable carry band in my actual dispersion? Not theoretical or loft-based, just actual separation in my real carry data. If 2 clubs routinely land inside the same front to back window, they're not 2 distinct steps, they're 1 wide step. If a club didn't create a separate window, it became a candidate for removal. 2nd, do I trust this club when I need it? Not on the range when there's no consequence, but on the course under light pressure, with a score attached to it. Because separation alone isn't enough. A club that you hesitate to use under mild pressure is not a scoring weapon, it's a liability, waiting for a yardage to expose it and blow up your card. So, if the answer included hesitation, it moved toward removal. 3rd, how often does this club meaningfully participate in my scoring? If a club rarely leaves the bag, then even if it technically has a yardage window, it's not meaningfully participating in my scoring pattern. Is it solving a real problem I face very often? Or is it solving a hypothetical problem that rarely shows up when I play? So when I applied those 3 filters together, the separation, the trust, and the frequency of use, the bag started narrowing itself. So the bottom line is I didn't force 8 clubs, the data suggested it. Maybe recommended is a better word. The long irons were the first to feel really exposed, because in my hands, their carry windows overlap with higher lofted woods. And my woods produced similar distance with slightly tighter dispersion. So if 2 tools cover the same band and one launches higher and lands softer, why carry both? That's not me being anti-long iron, that's just me being pro-alignment. So then I looked at the wedges. The loft differences suggested clean gaps, but my actual carry windows told me a more complicated story. And once I saw that, I stopped asking how many clubs should I carry and started asking how many distinct scoring windows do I truly own? And that's the shift. Because if your dispersion only creates 8 distinct windows, carrying 14 tools doesn't create 6 new ones, it creates 6 more branches. And like I said earlier, branches create negotiation. Now to be clear, 14 clubs is not the enemy. I'm not saying it's a bad idea to carry 14. 14 is a milestone. It's something you grow into, but not something that I think beginner golfers should default to. So my bag didn't shrink because fewer is better. The bag shrank because having distinct windows I can count on reproducing are better. Now let's talk about something that almost made me think I was wrong about this. So once I whittled my bag down to those 8 clubs, I created a shot carry reference card or matrix that listed my average carries per club. I thought it would be good to include some partial swings to help me narrow down my options with the smaller bag. So I added a choke swing, a quarter swing, and a relaxed swing, which is kind of like a pendulum dropping. So my goal of simplifying my choices took a wrong turn, and my carry chart looked crowded again. More dots, more ovals, more yardage numbers. At first glance, it honestly looked just as dense as the 14 club full swing chart. And I thought, wait, am I breaking my own argument? That's when I realized I needed to separate 2 different ideas. There's the concept of visual density and cognitive density. So stick with me here, we're going to nerd out for a minute here. Visual density is what the chart looks like. How many dots are on the screen? How many carry numbers exist? How busy does it appear? How many unique options do I have? But cognitive density is something different. Cognitive density is how many club heads are competing inside the same scoring band. How many overlapping options do I have? So those types of decisions actually affect your brain in a more significant way. They create more mental effort. So let me give you an analogy. Imagine you go to a steakhouse. I love me some steak. Visual density is how big the menu is. If the menu has 20 items on it, that's visually dense. Or maybe you've gone to Cheesecake Factory with its spiral-bound menu of everything. That's visual density in action. But cognitive density is this. How many steaks are sitting in the exact same price range, cooked the same way, described almost the same way? If there are 6 different ribeye variations that all sound similar and the cost is almost the same, you hesitate. You reread the descriptions, you second guess yourself. You ask your wife, what are you getting? You wonder if you picked the right one. The hesitation isn't about the size of the menu. It's about too many similar options competing in the same category. That's cognitive density. Let's bring that back to golf. Look at the 101 to 125 yard band where a lot of approach shots live. In my 14 club bag, inside that band, I had 6 iron full, 6 iron choked, 7 iron full and choked, 8 iron full, 4 iron relaxed, and 5 iron relaxed. So 7 clubs living in the same green band. That's like 6 ribeyes competing at the same price point. Now look at the 8 club bag. In that same window, I've got 6 iron full, 6 iron choke, 8 iron full. Just 2 clubs. Same yardage coverage. Way less mental competition. So when I was looking at 115 yards with a 14 club bag, my brain would start negotiating. Is it the 8 full, the 7 smooth, the 6 soft? Do I club up just in case? I wasn't choosing a yardage, I was choosing between anxieties. But with the 8 club bag, 115, choke 6, done. 1 head, 1 swing type. The shot was defined. And I want to name that idea because it matters. It's called shot definition. A shot is defined when the structure narrows your choice down to 1 primary club head and 1 primary swing pattern. That's what felt calmer. It wasn't fewer dots on the chart, it was fewer identities competing. When I choke down on a 6 iron, I'm not changing personalities. Same club and look, same feel, same motion, just a shorter lever. When I switch from an 8 iron to a 7 iron to a 6, I'm changing length and lie and swing weight, but that's a mental reset every time. And those resets add up. So yes, once I added partial swings, the 8 club chart looked dense again. That's visual density. But the cognitive density, the number of club heads competing inside each scoring band, was dramatically lower. And that's what changed my experience on the course. So now let's zoom into the 75 to 100 yard band. In the 14 club bag, I had something like 8 viable options in that range across 6 different clubs. In the 8 club bag, 4 options across 2 clubs. 4 options still gives me flexibility, but 2 heads keeps it defined. I didn't reduce yardage coverage, I reduced club head competition inside scoring bands. And that's why the round felt calmer. Not because the bag was lighter, but because the shots were more easily defined. So my experiment was never about locking my bag at 8 clubs forever. It was just about resetting it. And once I saw that overlap clearly, a new question showed up. If 14 clubs aren't the starting point, what's the logical progression? How do you earn clubs back? Even tour pros don't treat their bags as fixed or cast in stone. They swap wedges based on a course setup. Some add a mini driver. Some carry 4 wedges one week and 3 the next. Their bag changes based on conditions and performance. Now, the main difference obviously is that they have the incredible consistency to justify carrying 14 tools. They're not guessing at separation. They're operating inside tight dispersion bands. So here's the progression model I've been thinking about. Number 1, start with separation, not inventory. Before you add anything, your current clubs need clean bands. If your 6 iron and 7 iron land in the same ellipse, you don't need both. If your 4 iron and 5 iron overlap within 5 yards, one of them is simply decorative. You earn a club when it creates a new measurable band. not when it fills a theoretical loft gap on a spec sheet. 2. Add wedges only when dispersion justifies precision. More wedges do not automatically equal more control. If your 54 and your 60 overlap within 10 yards of each other, that's not precision, that's redundancy. You earn a lob wedge when your sand wedge dispersion starts to tighten. Your strike pattern is consistent. You can control the launch intentionally, and you can hit defined yardages, not just somewhere near the green. 3. Add long irons only when speed and separation justify them. Long irons are the biggest illusion in amateur bags. If your 4, 5, and 6 irons carry it within a few yards of each other, you don't have 3 tools, you have 3 versions of the same outcome. You earn a 4 iron when your 5 iron carries consistently enough that a stronger loft actually produces a new band, not because the set came that way. 4. Add scoring clubs when shot definition improves. Right now, in my 100 to 125 yard window, I have a workable structure. It's not perfect. My 8 iron dispersion still needs tightening, and if that tightens and the band becomes clearly defined, then the 7 iron might earn its way back into the bag. Not because I miss it, but because it would reduce cognitive density instead of increasing it. Right now, there's something just stuck in my head about my 7 iron. It's really more of an uncontrollable chaos club. So every new club must do one of 2 things: create a new clean band or tighten an existing one. If it doesn't do one of those, it doesn't belong in the bag, it's out. And we aren't casting your bag setup in stone by any means. Your bag size depends on how you are playing right now. If your swing improves, your bag can grow. If you're struggling with strike, it might shrink. That's not minimalism, that's calibration, and it's just common sense. At some point during this experiment, I started asking a really simple question. What distances does the golf course actually demand from someone whose average driver carry is 200? Because that's where I'm at right now. Although it's getting better. Played yesterday, I had a 235 carry to 220 carry, so it's getting longer, but a lot of this depends on how far you hit the ball. Because we talk about covering the course like it's a technical problem, but most of the time it's just a repetition or a math problem. So let's walk through it a little bit here. Let's assume a 400 yard par 4. If I drive a 200, I've got 200 left. My fairway wood, 175. So now I've got 25 yards short of the green. It's not a long iron problem. That's just a short pitch and putt problem. Let's take a 430 yard par 4. 200 off the tee, fairway wood 175, now I'm at 375, I got 55 yards left. Still haven't needed a long iron yet. What about a 520 yard par 5? 200 off the tee, 175, now I'm 375 out, that leaves me 145, and that's not a hero shot, that's just positioning. So most amateur par 5s are not reached in 2, you get there in 3, and if that's true, you don't need a perfectly spaced set of long irons, you just need repeatable chunks. For most of us, the hole looks like this: 200, 175, 100, 2-putt. That gets you around most holes. And I see this all the time. You watch a retired guy who hits 175 off the tee. He hits 150 with a hybrid. Hits a 90-yard wedge, 2-putts, par. No long irons, no 4-wedge arsenal, just predictable positioning. So when I look at my bag and I think I need 14 clubs to cover the course, I have to ask, cover what exactly? Because the course doesn't demand 10-yard position from 220 out. It demands smart positioning into scoring ranges. For most amateurs, the game lives inside 200 yards. And inside 200 yards, clarity matters more than coverage. So once I started looking at the course that way, the 8-club idea stopped feeling restrictive and it started feeling honest. For validation, I just scored my best round ever yesterday. I finally broke 90. I shot an 87 with my 8-club bag. It felt great. You don't need all those clubs. Maybe some folks do. Right now, I just don't. So let's reframe all this. My 8-club experiment didn't start because I wanted fewer clubs. It started because I wanted fewer variables. When I looked at my dispersion patterns clearly, I saw something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't lacking equipment, I was lacking separation. And separation is earned, not purchased. When I reduced the number of club heads competing inside my scoring bands, my shots became defined. One head, one swing type, commit. Now please understand me here, this didn't make the game easier, it just made it clearer. And clarity makes shot commitment easier. And commitment creates better swings. How many times have you heard the pros say that you need to visualize and commit to your shot? So from the beginning of our golf journey, we assume 14 clubs equals more precision. But if your shot dispersion doesn't justify those 14 distinct tools, then what you've really got is overlapping club identities that don't create confidence, they create negotiation and mental fatigue. So maybe the better question isn't, how do I fill 14 slots in my bag? Maybe the better question is, what does my actual shot dispersion truly justify? So if you've got a launch monitor, pull up your dispersion. Look at your ellipses. Where are they overlapping? If you don't have a launch monitor, go find a range that has one. Find a local shop with a simulator, rent an hour, and gather your own specific data. It's a little work, but think about how much golf costs. Think about how much time you invest in it. Doesn't knowing your real numbers matter? And if knowing those numbers led to a simpler way to think about the game, if knowing your numbers reduced indecision, if it increased commitment, if it made the round feel calmer, would that matter to you? Because that's all this is. It's an experiment, not a march against 14 clubs. It's the pursuit of clarity. And once you start matching tool complexity to skill consistency, the bag stops being tradition and it becomes architecture, a foundation that you build your game on top of. And that changes everything. If your bag matches your dispersion, the game gets mentally quieter. It gets calmer. You have more fun. And maybe your scores will improve as well. So as I like to say, bad swings are part of the game, but good data tells you what to do next. Thanks for watching.